great that you still made it. Last talk, I guess, basically, of the conference. So you are probably all tired, so I brought a pretty light topic. So something not too serious, but on the other hand, it's very, very serious. Just as a disclaimer up front, I have lots of code examples. I think only 2 of them are made up by me. All the others are real. Okay? It's either from student work or from company work. It's from different places, but most of the stuff is real. And you will probably recognize the made-up ones. So, Birdman versus Supername. While those 2 are fighting, they can stop fighting now for the minute. So, welcome. My name is Bjoern. I'm working for Kimminich, small logistics company. They also have some people here in Estonia, I heard, in Tallinn specifically. Always hiring, just as a short side note. So, yeah, my job there is, my official title is Senior Manager for IT Architecture, but I'm still able to write code, although it's a management position officially. For, I think, like 7 years now, I'm doing clean code trainings in the company. I'm also teaching Java development to engineers at a small university near Hamburg, Germany, which is quite a different, let's say, level where you go to then doing like high-level fancy architecture stuff, right? Because then you explain like, hey, what's the difference between public and private, and why does this main method have so many strange things in it? So I'm trying to do all kinds of things. And I've held 1 or 2 talks already. So let's just dive into the topic. So I would like to talk about with you about naming things and why bad names are really, really horrible. And this is pretty interactive. So I might show you some code snippets like this one and ask you what you think about this. What does this mean? Any ideas? Just shout some ideas at me. What could these method calls mean or do?
We are
Setting
setting Menocom.
Menocom. Perfect. Well, very, very well. Okay, is this an O or a 0, by the way? Oh, it seems to be an O. Okay, Menocom. What is Menocom? Any idea what Menocom might be?
Domain language.
Some kind of domain language. It's a smart. It's wrong, but it might be. It sounds smart. So I'll give you a little bit of a hint. So first of all, you don't initially recognize what this actually means, right? And whenever this happens, this is something I call it going into Batman mode. And going into Batman mode means basically you're putting on your detective kit and you're trying to solve some mystery, right? So the same stuff that Batman always does, right? He's trying to find criminals and to resolve some crimes and some interesting things. And the good thing is it's Batman's job to actually do this, right? So he has the costume, he has the fancy computer stuff and everything that he needs to do that, all these bad gadgets. He has Robin, his sidekick, who's helping him all the time. So it's his job to actually solve mysteries. The thing is, developers shouldn't solve mysteries, right? Developers should write code and not try to understand in hours of research what the code of the previous developer who worked on the topic actually means. And this is valid for names, it's valid for documentation, for code comments, for almost everything. So Batman mode might sound cool to play Batman once in a while, but it's actually not. It's a waste of time of yourself and of your employer. So back to the example. I give you a little hint. This is a declaration. So basically you were absolutely right. Right? It sets the Menocom. So at least the set was actually true. So okay, now I give you a final hint. The comment, okay, the Java doc. So here's the Java doc. And the first thing that you should notice about this Java doc, go home and learn German. Because it's always a good idea to do the documentation in your local language so that only you and your friends understand them or your family. I guess it's even cooler in Estonian because even less people understand that. Okay, so this actually means it's setting menocom, you're still right. And here is the explanation. 0 means human, 1 means computer. Okay, so basically it's for a computer game and it decides if the player is a human player or a computer player. You could have done this slightly different, maybe like this, for example, right? With proper naming of things. So like just call it set type and have some player type enumeration which you can set to human and to computer, and then you just read it and understand it. There's no need for comments or anything, and this strange menocom is gone. Okay, so always make it as clear as possible to your readers what you actually mean. So reveal your intent. Don't hide it. Any ideas what this is? ITOT and DTOY.
Int to double.
Int to double. Very smart idea if it weren't K and object. But this is one of the first initial responses. I and D must be into double. Okay, no, it's not. Index to data. Yeah, that's not so bad. Actually, it's the indirect to direct map. And you guessed it, the direct to indirect map. Right? So this is complete out of every league of possible things you can do in a bad way. So this is just don't name things like this. Nobody can understand this, even with the attempt of explaining things in a comment here. And I think comments like these you can safely just remove, because it doesn't even make any sense to rename it into direct to indirect map, because then still nobody understands it, right? So you should find out what this really is and then give it a proper name. So Batman mode again, right? We don't want that. No Batman mode. Okay, next topic, meaning. Now we get a little UML diagram. So it's a real fancy UML diagram. So looking at this class hierarchy, what do you think these classes or these services actually do?
Search.
Search. That's very good. What might they actually search? People from anyone from Kühne Nagel here? Please, you don't answer. Or even if you worked previously at Kühne Nagel, you don't answer. So, what do they search? These services. Sorry, parcels. Parcel containers. Where did you get that information from? You think? Because I said Kühne Nagel. Yeah. Yeah, you can look at the package name here. Shipment. So basically, again, it's unfair, right? So you don't really have a clue what does this actually mean? What is a level search service? First impression would be, okay, it's searching for levels. Maybe it's for a computer game again. But it's actually not. So and what is first level and second level? And why does second level have some strange subclasses for some global customer and for Black & Decker in particular? So what is this? Okay, so again, Batman mode. Right? This I'm intentionally wasting your time here, right? So you have to think about what is this stuff. And in daily work, you don't want to do that. Right? It's just wasting time. So Javadoc to the rescue. Wonderful, right? At the last Agile Saturday in April, I gave a talk about comments and how not to do them. And I introduced the concept there of uncamel casing. Basically, you just take the name of a class and just split it in the camel characters, and then you have the documentation. And there's different levels. So basically, you have no additional information in this comment, and this is basically the white belt skill level. So it's just taking and splitting the name apart, no additional info whatsoever. Okay, maybe in the subclasses, right? So maybe they're better. This service provides methods for the level 1 shipment search. First level search service. Okay, this shipment is actually a new information, but not really, because it's actually already in the package name, right? Like we saw, right? So this is a little bit higher skill of splitting apart class names and making documentation out of it, but it's still not adding any value. So let me solve that mystery for you. At Kühn & Nagel, we basically have a public visibility where we can search for shipments, and then we find only basic tracking information. So it's a little bit like typical parcel information search you get from DHL, for example, where you just have some limited information, but it doesn't tell you what's in your container or what's in the ship, right? Because you shouldn't disclose that publicly to everybody. So, and this is often called first level search. And then the second level search is the search where you actually have to authenticate first, and then you find the full details. The interesting thing is that these are no official logistics terms. This is no logistics lingo. It's not even completely official Kühn & Nagel terms. It's just that some teams use that terminology and it just stuck in the code, right? But it's not, you don't understand that by default, just by working at a logistics company. So it's, again, it's a bad name choice. So instead, we might have done something like this, for example. Public tracking, shipment search, and full visibility shipment search. Just might be better alternatives. Maybe there's even better names than those, but at least it explains what is meant. So, coming to disinformation. Entrenched versus intended meaning. So entrenched meaning is the thing that you typically understand when you see something, when you read this, right? And what is might the entrenched meaning of these be, actually? SSD, SD, CD. Storage devices, storage types, exactly, right? So the entrenched meaning of these is just storage mediums. So the intended meaning is an interface of shipment search DAO. SD is a shipment DAO, and the other is a container DAO. Okay, so this is a good idea to actually use these abbreviations. Right there at the declaration, it might be fine, but if you use it later on in the code, you might not remember anymore what the abbreviations actually meant, right? Especially if you have more like these, because this just doesn't scale. Okay, this I made up. This I made up just to actually better show how bad this actually is. Because especially if you look at this iStatus DAO, by using the pattern that was used here, it should be SD, right? But SD was already taken by shipment DAO, bad luck. So you can either try to use the next letter to keep with the one-letter pattern, or you just use two letters instead. So that gets confusing and completely crazy quite easily. Agreed? So, well, okay, this was made up, right? As I said, this is a bit ridiculous, so maybe it's not so bad. I mean, you cannot write the full name all the time. I'm still using Notepad as a development environment, so yeah, there's always so much work to type all this. Okay, so serious question. And the Riddler looks really serious. If you remember what SSTD is, please raise your hand. Silently. Do you remember? What is SSTD? If you remember, just raise your hands. I see no hands yet, just for the camera, no hands yet.
Something we made up. Something we made up.
Yeah, but what was it, SSTD? Nobody? Really? Oh my goodness, you must be really tired. It was, of course, iShipment status DAO, right? And I just showed you the screen with all the names like less than a minute ago, and you already cannot remember. So that actually shows how bad abbreviations really are. So, yeah. Ha ha ha. Up next, language. Don't mash up languages. Can you see the problem here? Actually, there's two. So this is the obvious one, right? So this is some German text and then the exception. And then up here, it's Werte, which is the German word for values. So why not just write values? right? So, and this time the same picture, but this time in German. So you already learned some German during this presentation. Geh heim und lern Deutsch. Go home and learn German. So don't do that. Okay, I once had the pleasure of doing a code review of some product which was written in France, and they not only had French Javadoc, they sometimes also used French method names, but only sometimes. So it was mixed, like French and English, complete mashup. Don't do this. Also, don't use these characters when they are standing alone, especially, right? So this is, I mean, this font type here it gives away which is which a little bit, right? But if you would be sitting further away, you couldn't really see if this is a capital I or a small l, or if this is a 1 or a small l, and right? So that's hard to distinguish. And especially if you want to, in Java at least, then when you want to declare, hey, this is a long value, so number type long, don't use this. Always use a capital L. Never use the lowercase l, because it just looks like a 1 to everybody. So bad naming choices. Encodings. To someone during the lunch break, I already promised that I would bring up Hungarian notation in this talk. Although I think it should be dead by now, right? So because most people don't use the languages where this was actually very popular and very maybe even useful. So using a B as a prefix for a Boolean, but if it's used as a flag, then use an F, not a B, right? Makes sense. It puts some context into the name, but it only confuses people. Actually, if you don't know the actual Hungarian notation rules that are used, or C for the count of some stuff, or FP for floating point, RG for range, so this is just, again, don't use prefixes like that, okay? That's definitely not a good idea. This is kind of, at least in the Java world, it's kind of a holy war sometimes. So the capital I in front of interface names. So maybe let's have a show of hands. Who is doing capital I's in front of interface? C#. Okay, the C# people, don't raise your hands because you're excused, because I think it doesn't work any other way. But who of everybody else is using the I in front of interface names, sometimes at least? Okay, why are you doing this? I know why I know why I'm doing this. I'm doing this sometimes because we have some legacy applications where we have our own self-developed framework, and the framework actually has some naming conventions that says, okay, interfaces of service classes must have an I, and otherwise the same name like the implementation class, because we will use some crazy mechanisms to actually instantiate them, right? So finding them by the name and stuff. So reflection. Never use reflection either. At least you're really happy about long night debugging sessions. Okay, so I think you should never put an I in front of an interface, except for when your framework or programming languages forces you to, because it just mutilates the name of the type that you should be using all the time, right? You should be using the interface everywhere, right? And the implementation class, which doesn't have the I in front, you just use once when you construct it. So why mutilate this poor interface when you could instead mutilate the implementation class, right? Nobody really cares about that. So that's why something like impl as a suffix or default as a prefix is still a better idea than doing this. But on the other hand, if you only have one implementation of your interface anyway, why have an interface? Just in case, maybe someone will at some point in time write another implementation. Not likely to happen, right? And if it happens, you can still extract the interface at that point in time. Okay, context. Next chapter. Redundancy is never a good thing, and if you have the same context everywhere, all over again, right? I mean, this is again from some computer game, some card game that some students of mine had to write. And they came up with this brilliant idea of having an action class. I mean, I could live with all the rest if it weren't for this action class, right? So basically, you can just strip away, of course, all this duplicate action things and just have it named like this. And for the action special, so very special cards in this game, they actually could just instead use a sub package, right? Looks much cleaner, much easier to read, and easier to find in your IDE as well. Okay, so consistency. That's also a very important topic in naming. So if you use different words for the same concept, that typically confuses people, right? So this is, of course, this example is made up. So we have an analyze chemical method, which returns a bad report about some chemical. We have an analyze explosive method, which returns a bad report about an explosive. But we have a dissect tissue method, sounds gross, and we have a parse fingerprint method, but they still return a bad report with some type, right? But I'm using 3 different names here. Actually, I'm using 4 different names. I'm just using the British and the American way of writing this. So, maybe not the best idea, right? So, how about this instead? Yeah, just choose one name for a certain thing and then stick with it. Much better. The other way around, you also shouldn't use the same word for different purposes, right? That's just as bad. So if we have our nice analyze methods here for the reports, and then we also have methods like analyze bad phone on hook, which returns a Boolean, and then some other thing returns a double, and here it's all analyze, then again this breaks this pattern. I mean, at least there's a blank line in between. Yeah?
Can I have a question about topic section?
Yes.
Which would be your recommendation to keep the chemical explosive tissue things repeating, or just rely on what they do? So you could have even shorter names.
Yeah, okay.
The argument already shows what you are analyzing anyway.
Yeah, that's true. This is just for to show that you could just have an analyze method and then just have different types going in. That's true. Yeah, that would also work. But that's then not about the naming really, but it's more like about how to cleanly design your interface. Yeah. But you're right. I could just have an analyze method with different parameters that I can throw in. But this is not a good idea, right? To mix all this. So maybe instead, just use 2 different words for the 2 purposes, right? So this is more like monitoring stuff. So we want to monitor if the Batmobile is actually has enough gasoline to drive, right? And the helicopter can actually fly and stuff. And while I'm already having 2 different method name prefixes now, 2 words, I might just as well split this up into 2 different interfaces because it's 2 different things, right? One is the monitor and one is the analyzing bad computer thing. So that might make more sense. Okay, let's talk about scopes. First of all, scopes of methods. So that's the rule for methods is that if the method has a long scope, so it's used in a wide different places, for like in public APIs, for example, it should have a short and evocative name. Not as short as so short that you don't understand anymore what it means, but not overly long. And if the method has a short scope, like private helper methods, for example, it should have a long and precise name. So you're not forced to look into it to understand what it actually does. Example. Here we have a service. It's called Net Survey Service. What does it do? Handles storage and retrieval of data used by the net survey dialogues. Okay, that's not a perfect comment, but, well, never mind. And the method name here is save new net survey run. What might be a better name for that? Save new thingy, whatever. What are we actually doing when we save something new? Create, yeah, perfect, right? It's just creating a new net server run. And here, update content encoding for net server run, even with some lead speak mixed in, very, very professional. That's actually quite a lot of redundancy in here, right? Because we already know it's about net survey runs because it's the net survey service. So probably the names could just be, for example, like this, right? Create and update encoding. That's it, right? Should be totally enough. It's short. You still understand what it's doing, but it's not. Don't be too verbose on public scope API. And the other way around, if you have a short scope, you can, or you should probably use a little bit more words to explain what this is about. And my favorite example for short scopes is actually test. So again, this seems to be a little, again, something from a computer game. So what does it actually test? It tests damage. Okay. So let's try to understand what this means. So I have a bot, so probably a robot, which has some value integrity and some value armor. And this robot gets damage. And I'm testing if the integrity has been calculated correctly after receiving damage. So it seems like the 10 armor are subtracted from the damage, and then the rest is taken away from the integrity. And I test that in several steps here. And here now I'm already also testing, okay, I take damage of 5, so but I don't get any real damage because my armor was higher than that. And then I'm testing, okay, I take damage and a lot of it, and but it shouldn't go below 0. It's a lot of stuff to test in one small test method, right? And then the name test damage is pretty bad. So let's put all the information about what is tested into the test method name. So like this, damage taken is reduced by armor and integrity cannot drop below 0. That's a better test name, right? Well, maybe not. Actually, this should be 2 tests, at least 2 tests, right? So damage taken is reduced by armor. This is basically what this is testing. And the other thing is that the integrity cannot drop below 0. That's a second logical assertion, right? And if you know, single assert rule says only have 1 logical assertion per test, not 2. And this was basically 2. You could argue that this might also be a special case and should have its own test method, but I think it's okay like this as long as you have this little explanation here in the error message if this test actually fails. Okay? So, but again, it's not just test damage or something like that, right? Always use explanative names, and it's the same for private helper methods. Okay, the scope rule for variables is basically the other way around. So if you have a long scope for a variable, so it's used in many different places over a long code block, give it a long and self-explaining name. And if it's just used in a very short code block, you can give it a short, reasonable name. Again, an example. Let's assume this is actually a computer game that I wrote some years ago. I tried to implement asteroids in Java with Java 2D. That was not a very pleasant experience, but it worked to an extent. And here are some variables. I mean, what does this mean? Inv. Any ideas? Invincible. Might be inventory, right? It is invincible, but or is it invisibility? Maybe it's invisible. Invisible, not invincible, right? So there might be different explanation what this actually is, and it doesn't really tell you, right? So and ACC, what is that? Probably acceleration. Yeah, I have no idea what about any other possible term for this, but ACC, yeah. Not really. So, and what is FPS? Computer gamers? Frames per second. And typically you only know that if you are either good with video editing or you're a computer gamer. Right? So maybe these would be better names for these variables. Because they are used over a very long number of lines of code. So 1,700 lines of code is just this class to implement the whole game. It was not my brightest work regarding clean code. Okay? And just as a disclaimer, I actually named the variables all like this when I wrote that, and I made up the bad example in this case. Whew. So. And show frame rate or show FPS, okay, you could argue, if someone is coming to a team which is writing computer games, you can expect that FPS is something that they actually know, right? So FPS would be fine. Inf and ACC is not fine. Okay, the other way around. If you have a short scope, you can get away with a short name. But it must still be reasonably easy to understand. Uncle Bob in his clean code book actually is very strict about these short names. And I actually like to soften that up a little bit, because if you just strictly always use very short names for short scopes, you can end up with some crazy SSTD abbreviations again, and that's not a good idea. So don't go crazy with abbreviations. An example, and the shortest possible thing is 1 or 2 letter names. So having an I as a counter variable for a for loop and an X or E as for exception, that's perfectly fine. But this is not, okay? So G arrest V index I. So here it's clear, yeah? Commissioner Gordon is arresting the villain at the position I. G arrest V is not clear.
What if we had villains in the for signature and then use V as an instance of villain?
Yeah, that would be okay, I guess. Yeah, because this. So if this would be villains dot length, or you would just make it a for each maybe in some way, then you could get away with V again. But in a for each, I think that's okay, because it's only used in this one line here. Huh? But here it's all completely messed up. So, coming to the end, and now it gets really very, very interactive, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that on camera later, on video later. So we will now do a little game of pronunciation. And here I really need your help, because what I want to do now, I will show you some class names, and I want you to read them loud, really loud, okay? I will give some explanation to the class names, maybe, but afterwards. First you just view it and just read it, okay? And this little helping red color is guiding you, so we get it like a choir in school back then, or in church. So, ready?
Yeah.
Very well. Let's start. That was easy, right? So why might I be complaining about this name? SWAT service.
SWAT is probably an abbreviation.
SWAT is an abbreviation, yeah. When you see it, it's not such a big deal. But if you talk about it on the phone, for example, especially maybe American people might have an impression like, oh, SWAT, police force coming in, shooting all the villains. Okay, so it's just about this little, the A and the O, it sounds similar. Maybe not the best idea to have it like that. Okay, next one. Yeah, okay, you're not allowed to laugh before, because then it completely messes up the reading exercise. Okay, KN lobby location. Any ideas what this might be? KN, Kühne Nagel, perfect, very, very good. Lobby?
Maybe it's an I. I don't know.
Maybe it's an I. Yeah, might be an I. KN EOB location. That has nothing to do with Star Wars. Basically, this K and Lobby, this is a 6-letter short abbreviation for a specific in-house XML message format. Right? So our internal messages always have these 6-letter names. And K and Lobby is just one of these. Okay, next one. And it's about its location for some reason. Especially very, very nice, yes. So you can imagine that when there's a segment G0 for 1 data, there might also be a segment G0 for 2 data, for 3, for 5, whatever, right? But this name is just horrible. It doesn't tell you anything about what this class actually is. And I have no idea what this class actually is. Next one. Okay, that was not so synchronous anymore. Okay, this one I really need to explain for a minute. So DX is for data extract. The 2 is because it's the second version of this data extract implementation. So DX2, this is filter, shipment, cust is customer, of course. Party doesn't have anything to do with parties. It's about like a political party, right? Like the customers. It's about customers' parties. And the X, any idea what the X means? No, it's not a treasure. Yeah, it's like in German it's a Kreuztabelle, so it's basically a cross-referencing table. So it's just a table between 2 other tables to get M to N mappings. That's why the cross is, the X is there. Okay, maybe also not the best name for a class. Next one. Okay, I will not explain that anymore. Okay, the last one is the best, I think, so get ready. Yeah, thank you, that's enough. Okay, get your quote, GYQ, obviously. FA, air freight, obviously, for a Kühne-Nagel person, that's totally obvious. CH, I have no idea. BPP, no idea. RES might be resources, restaurant, I have no idea as well. And DAO is data access object. So I understand the first 5 letters and the last 3. That must be good enough then. So, and I think there's probably nobody in the company who knows more letters than that, because the developer of this is long gone. He left. Okay, so this, I hope this felt a little bit embarrassing to you while reading it, because it's like, what the hell is that? But now try to imagine you don't read that among your development peers. You're reading it, or you're talking about classes like this while you're at lunch. And just imagine the looks that you will get from the HR and sales people, like, huh? Fear, like embarrassment, confusion, right? This is actually not fun, okay? So you're really, really coming across as really weird if you would talk about stuff like that. So that's all I have. It's 1:05, so I will not stand between you and the beer. That's probably a good idea. So thank you for being here. And just 3 takeaways. Think about names when you create things, right? If you find stuff that is badly named, rename it. Even if you understand only part of it, just rename that little bit that you understand. And don't talk about those kind of weird topics at lunch, so while other people are listening. Thank you.